Okay, I think we're ready to begin. Good morning, everyone. Council District 5 candidates, Westwood Village Improvement Association board members, and attending public. On behalf of the WVIA, we are very grateful that you are all here for our Council District 5 candidate forum. Welcome to everyone. I'm very pleased that our CD5 candidates are here, and I thank them for their time and their energy, especially this early in the morning. I hope everyone has had the opportunity to become sufficiently caffeinated. Our primary purpose of hosting this forum is to inform our WVIA board members who are leaders here in our community on the positions of our candidates. But just as important in my eyes is that it be clear that Westwood Village is a very important campaign issue in this upcoming election. We very much want our candidates to understand the issues facing our district, and we want to understand how they propose to work to resolve these issues. And our questions today all relate directly to some of the issues facing our district. We have 5 candidates present. They are in alphabetical order: Molly Bassler, Jimmy Biblars, Scott Epstein, Katie Young-Yaroslavsky, and Sam Yebri. We're very excited to hear from them today, and I thank you all for your time again. Before we do hear from the candidates, I'd like to briefly go over the structure of today's forum. I'm going to pull names at random out of a box to determine the order in which we will hear from the candidates. We will then ask each candidate, in the order in which we drew their name, to take 90 seconds to introduce themselves and maybe touch on some of their priorities for Westwood Village. Then, in the same order, we will begin to ask each candidate the same 5 questions that have been predetermined and shared with the candidates in advance. As we proceed with the questions, we are going to flip the order. So the first candidate answering the first question will be the last candidate to answer the second question, but the first to answer the third question, and so on. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to answer each question, and we will have a timer on the screen to ensure that we stay on track for our forum and are respectful of everyone's time. We will not have time for Q&A today, but I do encourage anyone with additional questions to reach out to the candidates directly. When it is not your turn to speak, you will be muted, and for everyone else here on the panel, please mute yourselves so we do not have any background interruptions. And then finally, at the conclusion of all the questions, each candidate will have 90 seconds to provide some closing remarks. With that, I'm going to complete the random selection now of the order of our candidates. I have a box here, forgive my very scientific approach. Our first speaker will be Molly. Second will be Sam Yebri, followed by Katie Young-Yaroslavsky, then Jimmy Biblars, and Scott Epstein. So with that, I'm going to turn on the timer and we'll begin the introductions. Molly, you have the floor.
Thank you so much. Thank you all. Thank you for this forum. My name is Molly Bassler. I'm a progressive Democrat. I'm born and raised in Los Angeles. I've lived in the district for 20 years. And Westwood is a very beloved community to me. I grew up running the streets of Westwood. My dad had his office in the Monty's restaurant office building on Glendon. We all used to go up there, come into the city to go see films. And so I grew up running the streets of Westwood. And so it's part of the fabric of my life. So, and my first apartment when I graduated high school was on Veteran Avenue and Ohio. So it's, you know, the old market, Westwood Market. So we used to go all through there. So I want to protect it. I want to preserve it. I want to bring in more businesses. You know, the 39% vacancy is just too much. So my priorities is getting it to be thriving once again, like it was, which I'm optimistic about. The bike lanes, safe bike lanes, and homelessness and crime. Thank you.
You still, I'm sorry, that's just a warning.
Okay.
You have about 20
So
seconds.
yeah, so the homelessness, affordable housing, and the crime, cleaning up the streets, supporting small businesses, and a safe bike lane. Because I'm a bike rider and I just really want safe bike lanes, especially in Westwood. Thank you.
Thanks, Molly. Appreciate it. Now moving to Sam.
Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Sam Yebri. It's good to be with you. We've done well over a dozen of these forums, but this one is really special to me. Westwood is not just my home. It's not just where I'm raising 4 young kids. and where I've lived virtually my entire life, and where I have fond memories growing up in the village, going to the arcade and Jerry's Deli. But Westwood saved my refugee family when, not unlike Ukrainian refugees, sadly today, we only had a few suitcases and nowhere to go. When we arrived as refugees when I was a year old, we were blessed to find an affordable place to live right here in Westwood, which enabled me to go to 3 great public schools and eventually Yale and USC for law school. And 12 years ago, I started my own business as a lawyer with my own law firm in the 5th District. And over the last 16 years, I've served 10 different nonprofit boards, including Bethesda Legal Services, the Jewish Community Foundation, the Friends of Westwood Library, EDA, which builds housing for adults with special needs. I've served Los Angeles as a city commissioner and on a gun violence prevention task force. But my wife and I, over the last several years, have watched the city that we love decline on every issue, an explosion of poverty and homelessness, corruption, crime, and also the decline of Westwood Village, which we love, the 40% availability, vacancy rate, homelessness and crime in our village. I remember walking with Andrew doing the homelessness count 3 years ago, the transportation problems, the need for real specific plan updates and making Westwood pedestrian friendly. And that's why I'm running, because the career politicians, City Hall and the county have failed us, and it's time for new leaders to bring the bold change that we need right now.
Thank you, Sam. Katie?
Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm an environmental and land use attorney by background, an infrastructure policymaker at the county, and a mom. I've got 3 little kids with my husband, and I'm a lifelong Angelino. And I'm running because I'm deeply frustrated at the state of our city. And I want my hometown, so many of our hometowns, to be a place where we can raise our kids and they can thrive and we can thrive. But we need effective, ethical, and proven people stepping into seats of power to make that happen. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. We need people who understand how to use the tools of government in partnership with the private sector to problem solve. I'm the only person in this race who spent meaningful time in both the private and the public sectors, which is important because the best solutions really require collaboration between the two. I spent a decade in the private sector as a land use attorney, Latham & Watkins, and then as the general counsel of a climate change nonprofit. At Latham, I helped create Century Cities Business Improvement District, so I understand how we can use the private sector in partnership with the public sector to make meaningful change on the ground in our business districts. For the last 6 years, I've made policies and programs on behalf of LA County Supervisor Sheila Kuehl and LA County's 10 million residents, focused on regional infrastructure and sustainability and the creative economy. None of these challenges that we're facing are going to be easy, but I have a track record that makes clear I know how to use the tools of government to problem solve. That's what this job is about, is problem solving in partnership with communities. I'm grateful for the opportunity to be here this morning, and I'm really looking forward to the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie. Jimmy? Oh, Jimmy, I think you're muted.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I'm Jimmy Biblars. It's very honored to be here. And as the 5 of us try to out Westwood each other this morning, I will contribute my 2 cents. I teach at UCLA Law School, and it's been a wonderful experience getting to know the Westwood community. I grew up in Pico Robertson, so just a bit south of Westwood. Off of Pico, I like to say 1 block south of Synagogue Row, in a little duplex apartment on Cardiff Avenue. And my political origin story started in adolescence. When I was 12, my family was evicted from our half of that duplex, and out-of-state landlord wanted to tear the 2-unit duplex down and build a single-family McMansion. And in the aftermath, we were sort of chased around the city by housing affordability, and both my parents struggled very seriously with substance use. And that issue has been motivating my life. I was at Harvard for college and graduate school and law school, and my research agenda was all about the rise of income and wealth inequality, and in particular, how it intersected with housing. I did get to teach some of that work now at UCLA, and I think a lot about the future of Westwood, because I think the future of Westwood is a real question for the future of the city. It's about whether we are creative enough and imaginative enough to say we want an urban form that is more walkable, that is more pedestrian friendly, where we're able to balance history and the need for real change in a growing city, where businesses can feel welcomed and supported, and that the government has their back, and an ecosystem that doesn't create the kind of vacancy that we've seen in Westwood. Westwood has the energy of academia, a strong small business community, and a major job center. If it can happen in Westwood, we can transform the city. So I'm very happy to be here and look forward to today.
Thank you. I'm sorry if these timers are annoying. Maybe we can adapt a little bit. Scott?
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Scott Epstein. I am running to make LA work for all of us, and I will bring leadership to the City Council that is grounded in community, guided by compassion, and focused on results. I am policy analyst by trade, mostly working in public policy research, and for the last decade, right at UCLA, first at the Education School and most recently as a public health worker at the Ash Center. I'm also a seasoned community leader. I was the chair of the Mid-City West Neighborhood Council for 7 years, and in that role brought substantial progress on the issues facing LA, including mobility, housing, and homelessness. Look, I think Westwood Village is a victim of a kind of zero-sum thinking. The notion that the interests of homeowners and tenants and business owners are somehow at odds with each other. Nothing could be further than the truth. We need to embrace vibrancy and solutions for Westwood Village and the whole 5th District. And we have the tools and the ideas to do so. We only now need the political will. We need a Westwood Village that's pedestrian and bike friendly, that adds more housing to address our housing crisis and provide customers for our businesses. We can do that together. I'm here to provide the leadership. I'm excited about the conversation today. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Scott. Thanks, everyone. Forgive me as I adjust some of the Zoom technology. Are the warning bells, are those helpful or not? Okay, excellent. Noted.
I would say that the timer on screen is beautiful and probably sufficient.
I'm going to say let's go with that then, and everybody can follow the timer, I'm sure. Fine. Okay, thanks everybody for your introductions and for sharing your stories. We're now going to move on to the questions, which cover a range of 5 topics. The candidates will answer the specific question in the order we have determined. I'm going to read the question one time, but if you candidates, if you'd like me to reread the question at any time, please let me know. Our first question pertains to the Westwood Village specific plan. And the question is as follows. The Westwood Village Improvement Association is advocating for amendments to the Westwood Village specific plan. We believe these amendments will encourage further leasing by eliminating strict caps and definitions for food uses, by eliminating parking requirements for changes in use and for replacement parking, plus would make ministerial the approval of signage in the district. Do you support these proposed amendments? And we are going to start in the same order we did the introduction. So Molly, we're going to begin with you.
Yes, hi, thank you. Yes, I support these amendments. I support all of them that help create business for Westwood and fill the vacancies and get Westwood back to the vibrant place it was and can be. So of course, I support these, and I'm going to just keep this short. And yes, I support them. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks for your brevity. Moving to Sam.
I do too, and I'll go into detail. I'm really pleased to see that the amendments to the specific plan were recently approved and in the process, and they're out of date more than 30 years. And this specific plan is a real example of why City Hall doesn't work. City Hall doesn't realize that every fee and every fine and every permit and every delay and every review crushes small businesses, especially in the pandemic, but even before that, right? There's a real correlation between these rules and why small businesses don't want to come to Westwood Village or have historically had a tough time succeeding. If elected, I would be the only business owner of the 15 council members in charge of a city of 4 million people and a budget of $11 billion. The only small business owner running in this race. I think the restaurant rules that you described never really made sense to me. There were some arbitrary distinctions between casual, fast casual, sit down, fast food. And we want a vibrant Westwood Village that has a lot of options, but not that has these arcane or difficult rules with lack of flexibility. I think the parking being relaxed is important. I don't support getting rid of parking minimums. I'm the only candidate here who's willing to say we're not there yet as a city or a society that we can get rid of all cars and all parking. There's a role for parking. I think one of the challenges for Westwood Village for a long time has been a lack of parking. We got to be creative with universal parking and working with the building owners nearby. Signage, I'm excited that's going to be relaxed, but I do think that there's a role for a review process as well. We want Westwood Village to feel like a village and have some of the characteristics that we appreciate. So I think there's a role to balance those interests. And this specific plan amendment is really just the beginning of a reform. We need Westwood Village to be pedestrian friendly. I'm going to bring that Broxton plan off the shelves and make it a reality, which will create a hub, a pedestrian part of the village. And we're going to work on all the other aspects too. And just in general, be a booster. When my friend brought Alfred Coffee to Westwood Village, it was in part because I lobbied him, because I said the future of Westwood Village is bright. And as the next council member, I'll make sure that it's successful.
Apologies for the ring. I'm still navigating this app. Thank you, Sam. Katie?
Yes, I absolutely support the proposed amendments, and submitted a letter actually to the Planning Commission last year urging them to adopt all the amendments. They can't be adopted fast enough. The incredibly high vacancy rate is proof positive that it's too hard to start a business in the village. The restrictions on the type and number of restaurants didn't account for all the new types of restaurants there are, and it's way too onerous. The signage requirements are really onerous. They can be made less onerous. And the parking requirements similarly prevent new businesses from coming in. And at a time when businesses are suffering everywhere, many would-be businesses simply don't have the patience to navigate this process. And so they're going to go someplace else. And that's what we're seeing over and over and over again. The specific plan shouldn't be used to police and prevent businesses from opening. And we need to make sure that a diversity of voices is heard and participating in the process. So it's not just the loudest voices making all the decisions. And I think that applies not just to the specific plan, but to land use and planning more broadly. And as a former land use attorney, I understand how to navigate these processes and make sure everyone's at the table and has an actual chance to participate in a meaningful way. I'm also committed to bringing Westwood Village property owners to the table, because we need some of the properties that have been sitting vacant for a decade plus to no longer be vacant, right? And it's unacceptable, and we need to find creative solutions to bring back businesses. I've had conversations with a bunch of business owners, Ann Philbin with the Hammer, UCLA, Westwood residents, community leaders, and a bunch of other stakeholders around the village issue. And look, it's completely fixable. It's a completely fixable challenge, and smarter land use planning, a creative economic incentives, possibly, and a really robust process is how we're going to get there. And also having a council member who's willing to do it and isn't going to require making everybody happy, because you cannot make everybody happy and have this actually happen. So.
Thank you, Katie. We're going to move now to Jimmy.
Yes, short answer, absolutely. I think these changes are at the forefront of what we want to see our city look like, a place where processes for business approval are streamlined, where you're able to preserve visual quirks and neighborhood identity while still allowing the types of growth that we know we need for a growing population and a growing civic and economic ecosystem. So I also see these changes as a key element of COVID recovery, that COVID has given us an opportunity to think critically about some of our processes and procedures and some of the ways we want our city to look. And Westwood Village is at the forefront of those changes, given the updates to the community plan. Absolutely on ministerial approval of signage. I know Santa Monica has had a real success with similar programs. And again, I really believe that you can balance preserving what makes Westwood Westwood with a procedural process that doesn't demand so much of business owners, so much study and regulation. You can't expect entrepreneurs to have to study the internal nuances of signage regulation if you want them to get their businesses off the ground. And I often say this, my respect started very high for small business owners, and it has only increased exponentially through running an upstart political campaign where you have to secure investors and build buy-in and create public messaging. And I really have a newfound respect for that energy and that appetite. Similarly, we need to allow more diverse types of businesses. We know that Westwood caters to various populations: undergrads, graduate students, tourists, and long-term residents, renters, and homeowners in the community. And that's part of what creates the vibrancy. You need businesses that are catered and welcoming to all of those groups, and some that are more tailored to different sub-elements of the population. Reducing parking requirements is a great idea writ large, and I'm happy to see the business community in Westwood be at the forefront of that. That's not always the case in other commercial districts. I spent many years in Harvard Square that has very similar issues. I feel like the Westwood folks would love to do a field trip out there. It's about balancing history, community, and a thriving economic ecosystem.
Excellent. Thank you, Jimmy. Scott?
So yes, the answer of course is yes. And I want to congratulate Andrew and the whole board on your leadership on this issue. These amendments are very badly needed and long overdue. And I'm proud to have shown up for the bid over and over again to voice my support for these common sense amendments. I will say that the fact that it's taken this long is a measure of how broken our city politics around business is. And I will also say that it's just the bare minimum of what we should be doing to make Westwood Village vibrant. So let me mention a couple of things. One is we need to change the culture in this city around small business, from one that puts roadblock after roadblock in front of small businesses to one that has a service mentality that says adding business and vitality is a good thing for our tax revenue, for the safety of our city, for the walkability of our city, for access to services by our residents. And it's important to recognize that Cheesecake Factory can afford the expediting costs to put a restaurant in Westwood Village. A small minority or Black or women-owned business that's just trying to create something special in the village may not be able to. So we have to understand the intersection of these issues. The other thing that I will say is Sam is dead wrong on parking minimums. Eliminating parking minimums is not eliminating parking. We have a congestion-based street parking program in Westwood Village that is working beautifully. We have a wonderful resource in the garage on Broxton. So we have parking. What we're talking about when we're talking about eliminating parking minimums is being able to produce housing that's more naturally affordable to students, many of whom are experiencing homelessness, and will add vitality and customers to the village. How could that not be a good thing? We need to make it okay to be able to build the normal urban buildings that we build all around the world on locations that don't have a historic resource.
Thank you, Scott. We're now going to move to our second question, and this comes under the parameters of Westwood Community Plan and Vision. The Westwood Community Plan will be rewritten in the next 2 or 3 years. This plan update is integral to the future of Westwood Village. What is your vision for the future Westwood Community Plan, and what is your vision for Westwood Village? And Scott, we're going to begin with you.
Yeah, thanks for the question. Westwood Village is one of the most amazing places in Los Angeles. You think about LA, most of LA is sort of commercial corridors backed by residential. You don't see a lot of places that have this kind of 360-degree urban environment. It's something very special. It's something to be treasured. It's something to be celebrated and to encourage and to bring more vitality to. So what can we do? We can build more housing in the village. That's a big piece. We have opportunity sites that are just craters in the urban fabric of Westwood Village. I'm thinking about, the parking lot at LeConte and Broxton and many other sites where there is nothing historic, nothing valuable, just emptiness. We need a council member who will champion growth in locations like that and champion a community plan that incentivizes growth in locations like that. So that's one thing. Parking minimums, which I was just talking about, is an important piece of that because not every one-story storefront is historic, but they can be very difficult to develop on if you have to put a huge underground garage under them. It also makes them a third to a half more expensive, which will price out renters, workers at Cedars-Sinai, line cooks, students at UCLA. That's a social injustice. We need to recognize that. So eliminating parking minimums in the village, which will have a Purple Line station and in the future be the intersection of the Sepulveda Transit Corridor and the Purple Line, 2 hopefully heavy rail lines, is the perfect place to add urban vitality and eliminate parking minimums, which has been done all around the world. And then we just need to work together to improve public space as well. The Broxton Plaza is going to be amazing. I've been a longtime advocate of that. We need to add bike lanes. We need to make it more pedestrian friendly and encourage public space.
Thank you, Scott. Jimmy?
To begin, it's walkability. I spent many years on the East Coast and fell in love with the idea that you could walk to a grocery store and a bar and 4 to 5 different restaurants and have your housing and your work and your play and your recreation all together in one integrated ecosystem. That's what Westwood is for a lot of people, but it's not that way for enough people, and it's not that way enough, if you will. So thinking about pedestrian-only sections of the Broxton plan, I think is fantastic, and I think it's something that has wide community support. but it's going to take a real push to get it over the finish line. As others have said, the reason these things don't happen is because of politics and people unwilling to take brave stances in the face of opposition of organized groups. And that's just the reality of politics. And I think you should take a look at our stances and how consistent we've been in the face of hostile audiences. I think that's an important way to measure candidates. I'm eager to engage with the proposals to utilize new transit opportunities to make the village much more bus friendly. I know there have been some concerns over transit making business accessibility more difficult. I think that those can be mitigated. And I think there's been a change in tenor, a real embrace of the new transit opportunities that are coming to Westwood for their capacity to improve foot traffic. I also see Westwood as a prime opportunity for new housing. Westwood has some of the largest job centers in the state of California, between UCLA and UCLA Medical Center, and all of the businesses throughout UCLA. We have to put housing where the jobs are. It's a social justice issue and it's a climate justice issue. People deserve to live relatively near to where they work. Putting more housing in Westwood, which is a relatively, it's a relatively dense area, but it is certainly not as saturated with housing as it could be, would help with foot traffic, would improve community connections so that people are living close to where they're working. We know that improves general quality of life overall. I see a thriving commercial business district with heavy foot traffic and diverse type of businesses that carry to various populations year round, from transient students to people that live there year round. Thank you.
Thank you, Jimmy. Katie?
So we have an incredible once in a generation opportunity with the Westwood Community Plan update to create more vibrant, healthy, and equitable neighborhoods on the West Side. And the process is going to be happening while Metro is also going to be coming in. And so this is a really huge opportunity, and having a former land use attorney as your council member to help navigate these processes and these incredible opportunities is going to be a real asset. When we put housing density in the right places in your job centers and transit that people who live in that housing are actually going to use, we can actually reduce traffic and create thriving communities. And it's just smart land use planning. And we can do it without touching any single family neighborhoods, and thoughtfully mitigate impacts through design guidelines and project mitigations. In terms of the village itself, I think we need to be focused on adding housing density in the village with a real focus on student, faculty, and staff housing in partnership with UCLA, and affordable and workforce housing. We can do this while still providing thoughtful protection of the village's character and historical assets. It's a balance, but we really do need to be bringing some housing density to the village. Most of the tens of thousands of people who study and work at UCLA, as you all know, can't afford to live anywhere nearby, which is why there's so much traffic on the West Side. We have the big job centers outside of downtown LA in Council District 5, and most of those people can't afford to live anywhere near where they work. And by putting people within walking distance of campus, we can make the village much more vibrant. We can increase foot traffic for businesses. It's an incredible opportunity. And when I was a law student at UCLA and lived in Westwood, we hardly ever came into the village to shop or to eat or to hang out. And that was pretty common actually among my classmates. And this was, almost 20 years ago. So it's been a very long time that this has been on the decline. And we need to change that. And the way we change it is through smart and thoughtful land use planning, adding some housing density in the village. Like I said, everything's a balance, but if we're serious about revitalizing the village, housing needs to come to the village, and we need to be thoughtfully updating our community plans to make our business hubs more walkable, cleaner, healthier, safer. And so I'm excited to participate in that process and lead that process with all of you.
Thanks, Katie. Sam?
So unlike the other candidates, I live in Westwood. Unlike the other candidates, I spend every weekend in the village. It's where we shop. I spend every weekend with my kids in Westwood Park. And the community plan update is long overdue. And there's a lot of talk about housing, which I'll address as well. We can't talk about a community plan responsibly or seriously without talking about infrastructure. Our streets, our sidewalks, our sewers, our grid, our water system are 40 years overdue for repair and upgrade. And it shows. Our emergency services are underfunded and understaffed. The crime is way up. Our police officers are down to 9,400 for a city of 4 million people. I'm the only candidate who's advocated for more police officers among this field. And police officers, we have to change their responsibilities. They respond to 140,000 phone calls related to homelessness alone. And the fire department is a big part of this as well. 80% of their calls have to do with EMS. Half of those relate to homelessness as well. I've gone to every station near Westwood and spoken to the firefighters, 37, 71, 92. A lot of them are working overtime, 72-hour shifts straight. That's not a responsible way to lead a city. We know it's not a matter of if, but when we're gonna have another natural disaster or earthquake, and we're not ready. So one of my focuses of the community plan update is to make sure our infrastructure in Westwood and throughout the 5th district is prepared, and it's not right now. In terms of Westwood Village, we talked about the big things. We have to make it pedestrian friendly. People attract people, but also it has to be clean and safe, and it's not right now. God bless the bid. You guys do an incredible job with your ambassador program, with your power washing. The small business owners I've spoken to almost everyone who in the village, and they really appreciate what you're doing. We need to do more of that. We have to ease up the rules. We have to navigate the first and last mile issues with the subway coming. We have to create a Westwood tech corridor with Google coming and take 500,000 square feet at Westwood and Pico up to the village. That could be an incredible corridor for innovation, for new businesses, pedestrian friendly, and yes, some more affordable and workforce housing. That's the type of housing that we need. TOC is not creating it. I'm gonna make sure we build workforce housing.
Thank you, Sam. Molly?
Yes, thank you. So yeah, to create, a vibrant Westwood, it's creating affordable housing, mixed use housing, like the building on Glendon where Trader Joe's is. They have the housing above, and so people can work there and so forth. So they don't have to be driving in and out of the city. Everything is at their, right in their neighborhoods, making it safe. And the homelessness, affordable housing. I think we also have to look at, other neighborhoods. I mean, because every neighborhood is linked, everything is interconnected. And so we have to also just stop this developing luxury developing around Los Angeles that has really created the homelessness issue. And that has been from the members of the council in present and years ago. This, they're in bed with the developers, and it has created a mess. So we have to stop that. We've got to be conscious of what we're doing, not taking money from developers and really creating affordable housing. Also, the businesses, we talk about businesses and small businesses. What we need to do as leaders, we need to inspire community to not buy on Amazon all the time. Nobody talks about that. I talked to a business owner over here in Mid-City. Her business went out because of Amazon. And I'm sure a lot of the businesses in Westwood is the same. So to build that up, we need as leaders to lead and have town halls and talk about how can we build the community? What can we do as people who live here to help support? And one of those ways is, Jeff Bezos doesn't need our money, but our local community does. And that's how we help the entrepreneurs. I don't shop on Amazon. So, and I always say that once a year supporting small businesses isn't enough on Small Business Day. So, when we have those days. So thank you.
Thank you, Molly. We're going to move on to our next topic. This is our 3rd out of 5, and it's homelessness. Homelessness is a significant issue in Westwood, in Los Angeles, and in the state of California. How do you propose city council work to reduce/eliminate homelessness in the city? And Molly, we're going to start with you.
Well, like I just said, once again, we have to build affordable housing. And there's also 3 populations of the homeless. We have the mentally ill. We need to open up mental facilities again that were closed years ago and get federally funded money to support those. We need to get our mentally ill brothers and sisters off the street. We need to change laws around that. And I know Newsom was talking about that finally. Nobody has talked about that. We also have a population of drug and alcohol addicted. We need to take care of them. And then I think we should, once they get sober and clean, train them to be homeless advocates. So we get them participating in the community again, and they become helpful, and they're making a living and become, they thrive. And the third is homelessness with the family and single women. That's one of the leading population now of the homeless. So we need to look at each one and take care of them and stop building the luxury housing that we have been doing for years and years. And taking money from developers. We have to come in this with integrity and support for the greater good of all, not just what is good for, specific things, but for all of it, because it's all interconnected. So that's what I would do with the homelessness. Also repurpose buildings, like I said, mix housing. So, and it has to be affordable for all people. So it's not just for one specific population. And I believe that is possible with the right leadership, and we stop dancing with the developers, and we come together and have conversations of how do we do that? How can we do that? I believe in unity, community, and that is that there is power in that, and that's what creates change. So we get conversations going. Thank you.
Thank you, Molly. Sam?
This is really the most important question for all of us. And I really appreciate Molly's answer and her focus on mental health and addiction and her earnestness, because I think too many leaders have been focusing on this solely as an economic and housing affordability crisis, which it is for many, but it's not for everyone. And I appreciate Governor Newsom identifying potentially a new mental health court system and changing the Lanterman Act, which is the mental health laws of our state, which are 55 years out of date. The confluence of these issues, a lack of a safety net, these mental health laws being out of date, focusing on just the affordability issues of homelessness, is leading to 5 Angelenos dying on our streets every single night. That has to stop. And there's a question in the chat about Westwood Park. And I remember Andrew and you and I walked Westwood Village 3 or 4 years ago in the homeless count. And we talked to ourselves like, this is no way for a human being to live. We have to do everything we can to alleviate the suffering of our neighbors who are unhoused. That is job one of leadership, right? Of anyone in government. By allowing anyone to suffer on the streets one extra day is a failure. And that's what the city is doing, and the county, because the county is responsible for mental health. I've rolled out a very comprehensive 5-point plan on homelessness which addresses the causes and also some of the major issues that we face. And it deals with prevention. The best money we can spend, the great ROIs to keep people in their homes. I support a right to counsel for all low-income residential tenants. We have to do more to prevent people from falling to homelessness through evictions. We need to build more affordable and workforce housing throughout the city, including the 5th district. But we have to invest in our mental health system. We need more beds. We have to change the Lanterman Act, because right now it's too late to save someone if the standard is you're an imminent threat to yourself or someone else. And then we have to do everything we can to move folks who are living in our parks or in our streets or next to our schools with urgency and with compassion into the shelters. And we have to double down our investment in interim housing options, especially tiny homes and other models that can get built and assembled immediately. Otherwise, people will continue to die in our streets, and that's not okay.
Thank you, Sam. Katie?
So there's no one silver bullet, right? There are a lot of different intersecting reasons why people fall into homelessness. So we need a lot of different solutions. And I think about this in terms of 4 big buckets of work. The first is prevention. Prevention is key. It's a lot less expensive and much more humane to keep someone housed rather than waiting until they fall into homelessness before we connect them to housing and services. There are a bunch of groups that are overrepresented in our unhoused population, people coming out of jail, youth aging out of the foster care system, seniors on a fixed income, and on and on. And those people are already touching county services and programs. And so when they come to the county for services, we can also be making sure that they're housing secure and that they're going to be able to make rent for the next month. And if they're not, we can connect them to services before they become unhoused. Prevention is really important. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to get our arms around the problem. 2, we need faster, more flexible, more affordable housing options to get people off the streets who are already there while we continue to build permanent supportive housing. It means everything from adaptive reuse of commercial buildings, hotels and motels, to shared housing and more. As a former land use attorney, I understand how deals work and how to leverage state and federal dollars to really buy down affordability in projects. And it's also worth mentioning section LAMC 4118, which prohibits people from camping and sleeping in certain places. When City Council adopted that, they also adopted a motion that called for using a street engagement strategy to connect people to housing and services before you required people to move. I think 4118 should only be used as a backstop. After you've offered people housing, you've connected with people, you've done that outreach, that deep outreach. If they're still not willing to move, then okay. But it's really incumbent upon us to find people housing that works for them. Otherwise, they're just going to be out on the streets. Otherwise, we're just moving people from one sidewalk to another. It's like rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. It's just not a solution. 3, we need better coordination between the county and the city. The county provides all the services, the city does the housing. They need to be working more closely together. And until we reform LAHSA to make that happen, it's incumbent upon elected officials to bridge that gap. And finally, as others have mentioned, we need mental health and addiction beds. We simply don't have places for people to go to get the help that they need. We shut down the mental hospitals. We don't have a place for people to go, and we need to build that right now.
Thank you, Katie. Jimmy?
Absolutely. So of course, the homelessness crisis is about mental health and it's about affordability. But what it should not be about is criminalization and arresting some of our most vulnerable folks. That is a counterproductive and incredibly expensive strategy. It should also not be about interim solutions that sound so good in theory and never materialize into any actual gains in the reduction of density of homelessness. Interim solutions are incredibly expensive, tiny homes, shelters, and they never in LA's history have come with real plans to transition from an interim solution to a permanent housing solution. What I'm about is permanent solutions that we can get online quickly and effectively, so we're not operating in this middle zone that is counterproductive and expensive. Homelessness is the housing crisis in Los Angeles is an iceberg. The street encampments that we see are the very tip of a much larger housing iceberg. And if we're not pushing both levers, what's above the surface and what's beneath the surface, we will never actually solve this problem. We've talked a lot about what's beneath the surface. That's thinking about where we can build new housing along underutilized commercial transit corridors near job centers in Council District 5. It's about fighting for more real affordable housing and building out a sustainable affordable housing funding stream that doesn't exist at the local level yet. If we're not pushing that lever and the street encampment lever at the same time, we're barely treading water on this issue because the number of people who fall into homelessness exceeds the number of people who we house every single day. On the street encampments piece, it's about bringing HHH permanent supportive housing units online much more quickly. That's having competitive bidding for contracts for HHH units. It's about modular construction and investments in alternative building materials and adaptive reuse projects so that that money is not being wasted. It's also about using multidisciplinary engagement teams. The best nonprofits do this work where they have mental health workers, medical professionals, and social workers engaged day in and day out in a consistent, methodical approach where they learn every unhoused person's name, story, and develop a tailored housing program that works for them. And it's about recognizing the diversity of our unhoused population. There are absolutely folks who suffer from multiple mental illnesses and substance use conditions, but there are also folks on the losing end of an eviction, a bad divorce, or job loss. Those people might just need a little bit of money to get back into the private housing market.
Jimmy. Scott?
Thanks so much for the question. So this is an issue near and dear to my heart. I've led multiple homeless counts. I founded the Midtown Los Angeles Homeless Coalition to connect unhoused neighbors in the Midtown region with services and housing. I would mention 3 main things. 1, we need a well-coordinated and resourced comprehensive outreach system for our city. And that involves reallocation of resources to the professionals that are actually equipped to do this work. So in Beverly Grove, near where I lived, we unfortunately had a tragedy where an unhoused individual murdered a housed individual. Cops were there very quickly in the morning before the incident when the gentleman was having a mental health episode. They couldn't do anything about it because it was not in their skill set. It took about 8 hours for mental health response to arrive. So we need to be taking our officers out of this work and putting it in the hands of people who know what they're doing and are cheaper. This is just common sense, folks. Number 2, we need to speed up the provision of both temporary and permanent arrangements for our unhoused neighbors. So I will apply the muscular leadership to cite safe parking, safe camping, and more to stabilize our unhoused neighbors. We know that permanent supportive housing is not getting up as fast as it need be. We need to provide safety and security for unhoused individuals. And we need to cut the red tape and the nonsense around permanent supportive housing. We have council members in the city literally voting to pull money, HHH dollars from housing projects. And we wonder why they balloon in cost. That's got to stop. The third thing I will say is our housing crisis and our homeless crisis are one and the same. What makes LA different from so many cities across the country is the depth of our housing crisis. We are housing more people than we've ever housed before. We are creating more unhoused neighbors every day. we need to fix housing as well. And that involves protecting our renters and building more housing for all incomes and all family types.
Thank you, Scott. With that, we're going to move on to our next question. It's involving transportation. Westwood Village is a major transportation hub in the city of Los Angeles with thousands of people moving through our community every day. Please share with us how you might improve access and circulation in the district, your position on bike lanes, and your position on a potential underground solution for the Sepulveda Transit Corridor. And Scott, we're going to begin with you.
Thank you so much. This is an incredibly important issue. So one of the key issues of my campaign is building a 21st century multimodal transportation system for Los Angeles. I'm a longtime leader in this space, and we need to do it in Westwood Village. I have been on the front lines calling for a safe bikeway connecting to Westwood Village for many, many years. And I've been on the battle lines in my own community, whether it's supporting Uplift Melrose or road redesign of 6th Street. And you know what? There are folks in CD5 that are not appreciative of my leadership as a result. I'm okay with that because we need progress, because we need safe streets that protect our most vulnerable neighbors. And we need to understand that the transportation sector in California is the highest emitting sector when it comes to climate change. And this is a climate crisis that we need to meet as well. So what do we need to do? One priority for me will be a low stress bikeway between the Expo line and Westwood Village that is safe for riders from 8 to 80. You should be able to take your children biking from the Expo line to Westwood Village. I will settle for nothing less. We also need to improve transit between those two locations. And let's also talk about the Sepulveda Transit Corridor. It's amazing that we were even considering an option that didn't have a UCLA stop. That would subject transit riders to the noise and air pollution of the highway. What we need is a heavy rail line with a station in Westwood Village and a station in UCLA proper. We need to be building for the future. I will be a strong proponent of that. And I look forward to working with you to make sure that Westwood can thrive and we can get folks there without cars. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Jimmy?
Absolutely. I think about this question a lot when I'm commuting by car to Westwood to teach, and it's a stressful experience to say the least. And the sadness is that there are buses and bike lanes that live in the Mid-City West neighborhood off of Beverly that go relatively close to UCLA down Santa Monica and the bike lane on Santa Monica that runs through Beverly Hills. But the problem is that these efforts are not frequent or reliable in a way that builds trust among people who are used to car transit, and that bike lanes are so disconnected and so unprotected that it discourages widespread adoption or use. So when I think about transportation infrastructure, we have to think about a grid, about a network, and the three pillars of a successful transit system: frequency, reliability, and safety, which is what encourages use. I'm generally supportive of bike lanes, but I'm not supportive of the bike lane to nowhere. The 6-block strip of a bike lane that doesn't really get you anywhere and that doesn't feel particularly safe. For bike lanes to be adopted, they have to be integrated with other forms of transit. That's first and last mile, that's buses, that's heavy rail. And they also have to be protected. We know that people only feel comfortable riding bikes when speed limits are reduced, when there's some sort of barricade, and when cars aren't moving into the right-hand turn lane such that bikers are cut off routinely. I'm also a firm believer in pedestrian-only streets. We love cyclovia. It's something that we should recognize and honor. We love this. This is an exciting thing that we have in these weird one-offs, right? That's something that you can imagine. And I often point to places like the Santa Monica Promenade, which was met with so much opposition from the community when it first started, and now is considered a crown jewel of Santa Monica, both from the business community and from the residents and from tourists the world over. I think there's a lot of opportunities to have creative integration between housing and transportation options in Council District 5. We know that housing and transit have to be tethered, and that if you add climate, of which emissions and housing sprawl are the two largest contributors to climate change, that's how you remake a city. That's how you have vision for the future of Los Angeles, and it runs right through Westwood.
Thank you, Jimmy. Katie?
We need to make it easier for people to get out of their cars, easier and safer. Everyone on here knows that traffic on the west side is almost impossible, particularly in Westwood. And smarter land use planning is part of it. And as Jimmy just said, so is smarter transportation planning. They go hand in hand, and they're really part and parcel of each other. This means making mass transit more accessible and efficient and safer, while also creating safe, viable alternative modes like biking and walking. I'm also going to be focused on making sure our intersections are safer for pedestrians. People aren't walking around because they don't feel safe. It's not a pleasant experience. Street crossings are dangerous. It doesn't have to be this way. LADOT has to be an active partner in this, and so does the council office. Metro coming through CD5 is going to transform our neighborhoods if we seize the opportunity, but we have to seize it. And focusing on completing first mile and last mile improvements before these stations come in is going to be really important. Everything from better lighting at night to dash shuttles, bike lanes, safer intersections. These are all going to be priorities for me. And I have a background doing this work because I helped create the sustainability office at the County of LA and help get the first regional sustainability plan off the ground and operational. Building out a connected, protected bike network is really important too. Ad hoc piecemeal sections here and there don't work. We need to build it out all at once. LA needs to be, it should be one of the great bike cities of the world, right? It's flat, it's sunny most of the time, it's on a grid, but it's going to require collaboration not only across different council districts, but across other cities as well, right? Because CD5 touches Beverly Hills, West Hollywood, Culver City. I have relationships there. I'm going to make sure that we're creating a truly integrated grid so that when people use it, it's a seamless process and a seamless experience. And I really do believe that if we build out this bike infrastructure, people are going to use it. Not everyone's going to use it, but so many people will if it feels safe and if the network's connected and gets people where they need to go. And that means it needs to come into Westwood Village because it's one of our big job centers, right? We can mitigate concerns around loss of parking and things like that through thoughtful planning, shared parking. As a former land use attorney, I have experience doing this work. And in terms of the Metro Sepulveda route, I believe we need to stop on campus at UCLA no matter what. And whatever technology is ultimately adopted, it has to work seamlessly with the rest of the system. It has to be efficient, and we have to mitigate neighborhood impacts as much as possible. And I'm going to wait and see what the CEQA analysis shows before weighing in on a preferred route. But it has to have a stop at UCLA for sure, and it has to be efficient.
Thanks, Katie. Sam?
So every day, pre-COVID numbers, 80,000 people drive through Westwood, through the village into UCLA for work, the hospital, students, for recreation, right? Transportation policy is fundamentally climate policy, right? So it's an environmental imperative to get people out of their cars, to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, right? The best way to do this is with the subway line coming, 7 subway stations, a purple line coming to the west side, including the stop at Wilshire and Gailey, Wilshire and Westwood. We have a once in a generation chance to actually get people out of their cars, right? And I've actually done this myself for the last 7 years. I've gotten around Los Angeles without a car, relying on different modes of public transportation and walking and scootering and Ubering and carpooling. I'm fortunate because I live a few blocks away from my office, and I'm really excited that I'm going to be living a few blocks away from a subway station in Century City, right? That's the future. But we also know that ridership is plummeting, even with gas prices skyrocketing. And it's easy to say, yeah, let's make sure Metro is safe. But it takes hard work. It takes serious leadership who's going to say, look, why do people feel unsafe? What policy decisions have been made at the city and the county at the Metro level, perhaps to defund our Metro PD, that is leading to skyrocketing crime and people feeling unsafe, right? We're making a $9.5 billion investment in these subway stations near us, near Westwood. People have to use it, and they're only going to use it if people feel safe, and they don't right now. On the other issues, on the Sepulveda line, it needs to be environmentally responsible, has to get people where they need to go fast, and connectivity is imperative. So I will only support a route that has a stop on the UCLA campus for the reasons I've talked about, that it could end up being the most heavily used station throughout LA County other than the downtown one. And we don't want to have people have to walk between stations. So I will only support a proposal that includes a stop at the UCLA station.
Thank you, Sam. Molly?
Yes, thank you. yeah, I'm a big supporter of the bike lane, completing the bike lane south of Wilshire that will come back into Westwood, and safe bike lanes to inspire people to ride their bikes. There's plenty of space. I've been going around District 5 and there's all this empty space, especially through Wilshire and up around Holmby Park, and all those areas should be bike laned. I mean, there's wasted space. So I want to create that, more buses, electric buses, which we're moving into, buses that run on time, also clean and safe, as Sam was talking about. People don't want to go on public transportation because it's not appealing, and most of the buses run late, and then people are late. And the subways are great. I can't wait till those are done coming into Westwood, which will create a hub there. And clean and green transportation and getting people out of their cars. I think also what we need to do is we need to educate people, gathering the community and getting that, educating them on their choices, because a lot of people don't know. Most people don't even know who their city council person is. Most people don't know what district they live in. And that has to change. Most people don't even vote. So how are they going to know their modes of transportation and the choices they have? It goes down to these really systemic issues, especially like crime. Why is our city so unsafe? Partly because of the pandemic, but also our educational system is terrible. People don't get trained or educated to get good jobs. And then they're on the streets. We have to go get to the systemic issues. We keep talking about the same old thing, and it gets really old. We need real change, bold change. And that's going after the systemic issues and then creating change within our community, Westwood. Thank you.
Thank you, Molly. We're going to move now to our final question, and it is about community and leadership. Westwood is home to many community groups, often with competing interests. Please explain your leadership style, how you plan to build consensus, and how you will respond when consensus cannot be reached, but action is required. And Molly, we're going to start with you.
Yes, thank you. Like I said, I'm I'm a community organizer. I organized the Green Dream campaign for the Democratic Party to get all the Democrats, the clubs, all of our venues to be green and regenerative. So we're not just talking the talk. We walk the walk. It's not the speeches we make, but the actions we take. You want to see what a leader's doing, see how they live and what they're doing in their everyday lives. It's not just, bringing it to the people. It's what am I doing as a leader? So I'm an organizer. I believe in gathering people. Unity is power. Unity is a word part of community. And we need to come together. And also, I want to listen to everybody. And I'm a consensus builder. So that's what I want to do. Town halls, I want to be transparent. I want to inspire the community and gather everyone, because everybody's voice is important. And then in the final, if something comes where we can't come to a consensus, that's where we'd have to do, the democratic way, the majority of what is best for the greater good of all. And that's where I want to lead by example, bringing people together, educating people what is going on. Once a month, I want town halls. And, Westwood Park is perfect for that. And Pan Pacific Park, all the great green spaces, Holmby Park, I'm on the advisory board of that. And I just want to bring people together so we're working together. It's transparent. People know what's going on, where their money is going, their taxpayer money, what's going on with homelessness, what's going on with crime, how can they participate? It's about me being a public servant to the people. And I want to do that and bring the best that I can to them and serve the people, which is the community, which is the city. Thank you.
Thank you. Sam?
So talk about leadership style is cheap, right? We actually need to see what each of us has done, right? I'm the only small business owner among us, which means I've had to meet payroll, hire, fire, and be responsible for running a business. I'm the only person who's been on 10 nonprofit boards. As a nonprofit leader, I built housing for adults with special needs in the 5th District, including the tallest, most dense project that we're building right now on Pico. I chaired the Jewish Community Foundation's response to the pandemic in Q2 and Q3 of 2020. We give out $8.5 million for food insecurity and housing security organizations across the city. We had to navigate competing interests there. And as a community organizer as well, I've engaged thousands of new Americans in civic life as part of a nonprofit that I founded. I was a city commissioner as well, which means on the Civil Service Commission, I had to be decisive and decide whether or not a disciplinary action involving a city employee should be upheld or overturned. Professionally, I'm a litigator, but I'm also a mediator. I'll go to war for my clients. I've won big battles in the courtroom against some of the biggest corporations in this country, but I've also been a mediator, which means you have to bring people together around shared interests to find a settlement, a resolution, and no one will ever be happy with that. That's the definition of a good settlement. And I think it's a council member's job is not to pick winners and losers, not to kill projects that have a little bit of opposition or to approve every project that's brought to him or her, but to find community win-wins, to make sure the community benefits, right? That is what this job is about. This is about the day-to-day quality of life of the residents of the 5th District, not ideology, not slogans, not what's popular on Twitter. I will be decisive after working with our community. And then on a key point that Molly and I talk about a lot, which is the corruption in our city, 3 of the 15 council members that are in charge of our kids' safety and the quality of our life, in charge of our $11 billion budget, are in or facing federal prison for accepting all types of bribes. And that's why we see only luxury apartments getting built around the city, things that just don't make sense, and communities not getting those win-win. And that's why I'm not taking money from special interests of any kind, PACs, developers, fossil fuel companies, corporate money, just individuals. And you need leaders who are going to lead by example, and that's what I'm doing.
Thank you, Sam. Katie?
So I'm a collaborative person with a proven track record of getting really contentious things done with a bunch of diverse stakeholders who often start from opposite places. Over a period of about 3.5 years, I led the development of what became known as Measure W. It was on the November 18 ballot. And it creates a new funding stream for green infrastructure projects. And people have been trying to do it at the county for more than 30 years. And it involved bringing the business community in, the largest landowners in the county. Labor was at the table, 85 of LA County's 88 cities, hundreds of nonprofits, community-based organizations, public health groups. And I created a truly iterative process where people felt real ownership over the pieces of the program that they cared most about. And we managed to get it onto the ballot without any funded opposition, and it was adopted with almost 70% of the vote. And so that's how I lead. It's a collaborative, iterative, respectful process where people have a chance to really bring their issues to the table and find ways to meaningfully engage. My land use and planning background is going to be really important as we try to navigate all this as communities together. I know how important it is for my office to bring people together and create a really transparent, iterative and inclusive process. Look, as humans, we tend to be naturally averse to change, especially in the context of land use when it comes to our own neighborhoods. But when we show folks what our communities can look like, with smarter land use planning, I believe most folks will come around. They usually do. My job as council member is really twofold: to guide the process and make sure all voices are heard, and 2, to weigh in and make decisions. Not making decisions is actually making decisions, and it's not acceptable. I'm not going to be a passive participant in this process, because if we want to create the Westwood Village, we know what has to become. I and my office are necessarily going to be engaged. You're not electing me to stay out of these conversations. You're electing me to lead the conversations, guide the process, bring people together, find common ground whenever possible, and then take positions. I know how to make meaningful progress. I have a track record of doing it, and I'm looking forward to doing it here too in partnership with all of you.
Thank you, Katie. Jimmy?
Absolutely. So for a given issue, I start by bringing together the top minds and begin drafting policy ideas from there in conjunction with engaging with the most impacted community members. I'm an academic by training, and I don't think there is nearly enough research-driven focus in local policy making. The myths that fly around have astounded me day in and day out. Building policy from there and then embarking on a public education campaign and clearing up misinformation and confusion about these tricky policy areas. Then I work to bring in as many hostile audiences as possible with honest listening and creative messaging. And finally, act, recognizing that you're not going to please everybody and that the courage of your convictions matters, but you hope that you've built enough trust with people who disagree with you that they still feel valued and respected. I believe in meeting people where they're at and that political participation should be easy. Elected officials should be proactive rather than reactive. Real representation means finding people at their doors and on their phones, and it means making City Hall engagement much easier. It's also a delicate balance between being responsive to the community and remembering that the loudest voice doesn't necessarily speak for the most people. And that's why making political participation easy is our best shot at a truly representative politics. And lastly, I think it behooves us to think creatively about messaging, because I tend not to think that people's views are as hardened as we might think that they are. For instance, my views on housing differ from many segments of the CD5 community, but I've developed a series of questions that I found effective at disarming some of these folks. How many of your children moved back in with you after college? And half the hands go up. How many of your adult children still live with you? Half the hands are up. How many of your children have moved to Colorado, Texas, Washington, or Oregon in the last 7 years? And 3/4 of the hands are up. And it gets people thinking, and I say, this is the housing crisis affecting all of us. And it doesn't change everybody's mind, but it gets people thinking, and it does so in a way that brings them into the capacity for change. And that's what I'm trying to inculcate and how I'll lead as an elected official.
Thank you, Jimmy. Scott?
Thank you for the question. I think it's such an important one. I have a strong record of leadership in this district. So I'm the only candidate in this field who's been elected in CD5 4 times actually, and elected by my peers on the Mid-City West Neighborhood Council to lead them 7 years in a row. In that capacity, I led what was widely recognized as perhaps the most effective neighborhood council in the city. Everyone had their say. We ran an accountable, transparent council. And at the same time, we acted. That's how you get things done. You give space for everybody to have their point of view, for everybody to be heard, and then you act decisively. I acted decisively over and over again to support redesigns of our streets to make them safe for everyone, to support displacement-free housing on our boulevards over and over and over again. You can look at my paper trail, it's clear. To support compassionate solutions for our unhoused neighbors, to make sure our neighborhood council was engaging on homelessness and racial justice. And as a result, some folks didn't appreciate my leadership, and I'm okay with that. We need to act decisively to fix the systemic challenges in this city. A couple other things that I will say. It's really important that we get as many folks engaged in civics as possible. I have a strong track record of that. I've brought dozens of people into civic engagement by recruiting them to serve on neighborhood council, the board and committees. And if you look at the coalition that is supporting me, it is a diverse one with young people, older people, people of all ages, sexual orientations, religions. That's the kind of coalition we need to build change. That's the work we're doing as a candidate and a campaign, and it's unmatched in the field.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you, candidates. I really appreciate your candor in answering these questions. I know it can be difficult to summarize and still provide detail in 2 minutes, but I'm very impressed with all of your answers. With that, we're now going to move to conclusions and final remarks from the candidates. You'll have 90 seconds. And Scott, we are going to begin with you.
Thank you so much for the robust conversation. I want to talk about a few things. One is my record of success. So I am the only candidate in this campaign that has a bold vision for how we move comprehensively to solve our problems in Los Angeles, a record of results, and the coalition building skills to get it done. At Mid-City West, we brought in $2.3 million based on a project that I conceived to create neighborhood greenways through the community. It's the first time a neighborhood council has ever done anything like that. We turned $42,000 a year into $2.3 million for the community. I founded the Midtown Los Angeles Homeless Coalition, and conversations within that coalition led to the only bridge home shelter in CD5 on La Cienega. I championed what may be the first permanent supportive housing project to get in the ground in CD5 at Willoughby and La Brea. So I have the battle scars and the record of getting things done in this community. The other thing that I will say is it's important to have leaders that understand the struggles. that regular Angelenos are going through. I have lived this housing crisis. I've lived in housing that's poorly maintained with very little power to compel my landlords to make the changes that are necessary. I bike and take the bus to work because I live in a car light family. And so I understand the gaps in infrastructure on the ground. I'm working to make sure LA works for all of us, and I have the skills to make it happen.
Thank you, Scott. Jimmy?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. It's been wonderful. I'll leave you with this. This election is about optimism. It's the first time in over a decade that Council District 5 has been an open seat. It is a once in a generation opportunity to say, look, we want something different. Our city is at a crossroads, especially in West LA. And if we don't act quickly and decisively to change, Los Angeles will no longer be the engine of social mobility that has long been imagined to be, but instead a place only the 1% can afford to live. But optimism is what provides that creative force to build coalitions and to help people imagine that our city can be made better, that it can feel better, that it can be easier to live here, and that we feel like our future is brighter than our past. Let's imagine a city where more folks can afford to live here, especially in the wonderful places like Westwood, where businesses can thrive and grow, and where people feel like the government has their back, rather than as an antagonistic force holding us down and neglecting our basic needs. I bring two main things to this race. First is a life course altering experience with housing precarity that has set the tone for my life and my life's work focus on income and wealth inequality. And second, a decade spent in the trenches researching and studying and teaching about the issues that are most pertinent to this city. So today, I'm very glad to be with all of you, and I look forward to connecting more in the months and years to come.
Thank you, Jimmy. Katie?
Los Angeles doesn't have to be such a hard place to live and raise a family. And the way we bridge the gap between where we are as a city and where we need to be is through electing the right people, people who are proven and ethical and effective. My door is always going to be open. I'm looking forward to partnering with you to make sure we get where we need to be. I have that track record of creating and negotiating and implementing broadly supported policies and programs that are already tangibly improving the lives of millions of Angelenos. And I am going to bring that same collaborative spirit to the City Council. I understand that so many of the challenges we're facing as a city are actually regional challenges. They're intersectional challenges: homelessness, public health, public safety, our economy, climate. These are all complex challenges that are going to require nuanced solutions, and having people in these seats of power who know how to work across jurisdictions, understand where the money is and how to leverage it, because we've already been leveraging it, and are going to be effective coming in on day one is going to be really important. I know how to do this work because I've already been doing this work. I'm good at this work, and I'm ready to step in and lead, not just on behalf of Council District 5, but on behalf of all Angelenos. Our city needs folks on the council who have the hard skills to do the work. Westwood Village is going to become, once again, after a generation, the place to be. It's not rocket science, it's smart land use planning, creating partnerships where right now there's division, and elevating all voices, not just the loudest ones. I'd be deeply honored and grateful to have your support. If you can vote, please reach out, give me a call, or send me an email. My email is katie.yaroslavsky@gmail.com, or check out katie4la.com. I'd love to talk to you, and I look forward to working with all of you. Thanks.
Thank you, Katie. Sam?
Right. Well, first off, thank you to the bid for this opportunity. Andrew, thank you for your good work over the years and your board. Like I said, as someone who goes to Village every week, I appreciate the power washing, the ambassador program, the beautification, the important work you do to lift up Westwood Village. I love this damn city to my core. It's a city of endless possibilities, a city that enabled me and my family as refugees to live the American dream, a city that's allowing me to potentially be the first Iranian American to hold public office in the history of Los Angeles. But for far too long, City Hall has not reflected the energy, creativity, integrity, and diversity that define us as Angelenos. Instead, all we've gotten is an endless musical chairs of the same career bureaucrats, their staffers, and their family members. Hiring more insiders and bureaucrats and expecting better outcomes is the definition of insanity. And that's why our city's falling apart. And that's why I'm committed to running a different type of campaign, one that puts communities and families first. That's why I'm not accepting money from real estate developers, fossil fuel companies, PACs, business entities, or any special interests of any kind. We're also the only campaign to have built a broad coalition with progressives and moderates, such as Supervisor Holly Mitchell, Congresswoman Annette Berrigan, legendary Congressman Henry Waxman. We're also the only campaign to have both the support of unions and business groups like the West LA Chamber of Commerce, and most importantly, 1,300 community leaders, including hundreds from Westwood, who have recognized my leadership in the community and endorsed us. I know the government can't do this alone. We got to do it with the community, with nonprofits, with the business community. If we have any chance of turning our city around from this decline, please visit us at samforla.com.
Thank you, Sam. Molly?
Yes. Hi, my name is Molly Baszler, and I'm running to serve the people of Los Angeles, District 5, Westwood Village. I am here to serve, be a public servant. I'm also here to lead by example, which I've said, getting at systemic issues, thinking out of the box. I am running a green and regenerative campaign, which no other candidate is doing. It is time that we lead by example. We cannot go on the way we have. We cannot live life as we used to. We do not have that luxury anymore because of the climate emergency, because of the population that we have in LA. Things are completely different, and we need to lead with that leadership. I mean, the whole process of campaigning is so wasteful, and that needs to change. The way city uses paper and plastic, and we need to connect with our brothers and sisters up in Sacramento, what they're working on. My whole idea is to connect, to serve, community unity, and also our fellow leaders, that we don't just live in a bubble. It's all interconnected. I mean, we live in a global world at this point. We're not in a little bubble. So we have to reach out to all levels of government, come together on big issues, small issues, bring the community together, educate them, let them know what's going on, and let them know who their city council person is. So we are in this together. Molly, LA2022.com. Thank you.
Thank you, Molly, and thank you to all the candidates. I'm so grateful you're able to spend part of your morning with us today. I really appreciate it. Thank you for providing our board members with insight onto your positions on the matters that really affect Westwood Village and all of our lives. Thank you to all our attendees who came, and I know there were some questions in the chat. Please feel free to reach out to the candidates directly. I know they'd be happy to talk with you further. Thanks everybody again, and have great mornings.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Bye now.
Thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you very much.
Take care, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.